In late May, Confederate statues, some more than 100 years old, were removed from public display in public places here in New Orleans. The man giving that order was Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
The Civil War continues to be relitigated over time. I don't understand why we continue to relitigate it. Historically, the Confederacy, which was never a formal governmental entity, fought to destroy the United States of America over the issue of slavery. That is a historical fact that we now need to confront and to accept. We also can clearly say, now that we're so far removed from it, that the Confederacy was on the wrong side of history, because the cause of the Civil War was to deny the humanity to millions of our brothers and sisters who were African American. And I just wanted, as the leader of a southern city, a modern southern city in 2018 that's getting ready to celebrate their 300th anniversary, who was really thinking about what kind of symbols that we had in our city and asked whether or not that reflected the totality of who we are. These Confederate monuments in prominent places of reverence, in our most prominent spaces, were really kind of an affront to our identity, and really was a historic misrepresentation, and then finally crowded out all of the other history that we have that we've never really celebrated. So the Essence Music Festival, for example, really celebrates another part of our history. We sold more people into slavery in New Orleans than anywhere else in the country, but there are no slave ship monuments here. There are no slave blocks that people were sold off of. There are no nooses that reflect where the lynchings were. And so I accuse the quote-unquote historians of historic malfeasance because they just forgot to tell the whole story, and then they co-opted a piece of land that was owned by the public. That seemed to me to be wrong. Wow. And it seemed to be unjust to ask African American citizens, 67% of whom make the majority of our city, to walk by pieces of property that they own and ostensibly be forced to genuflect before a statue that was put up to say that they were less than human. Now, I just don't find what's so cataclysmic about that in 2018, and it's sad that the response, mostly from people outside of New Orleans, was so threatening. But they engaged in actions that, in my opinion, were tantamount to burning a cross on people's lawns to intimidate them into not telling the true story and our true history. And I just believe that we're better together than we are apart, and I think that we should be looking forward, not back. But you cannot look forward unless we acknowledge what we did wrong, unless people accept an open and an honest apology, and until they forgive. You can't have reconciliation unless you have that. And I don't think that should be so hard for us now in the dawning of the 21st century.
You know, it leads to you talking about the future. I was reading a study this week, Mr. Mayor, with the debate around climate change and this president pulling out of the Paris Accord, that southern cities will suffer more than anyone, any particular locations in this country, if we don't do something about climate change. A city that you're mayor of would be a case in point.
Well, let me, again, take you back to what you asked me about the Conference of Mayors and how we respond to this president's denial of facts and science. Well, first of all, just because the president pulled out of the Paris Accords doesn't mean that the nation has to stop. As my kids used to say to me before I punished them, "You're not the boss of me." And I said, well, the mayors of America, if acting in unison locally at the same time, we can actually act locally and create a national policy, a national consequence. So most mayors in America, Republican and Democrat, know that climate change is real. We completely accept that man contributes to it, and it's going to have catastrophic consequences that are slow-moving, but they're absolutely going to happen. In my city, as much as Miami and every other coastal city, which is most of us in America, and absolutely all of the cities along the Deep South, are going to suffer dramatically from a couple of things. In Louisiana, we have coastal erosion, we have the land that's subsiding, and then we have the sea that's rising. What that means is it ain't going to be there no more. That's essentially what that means, unless we do something dramatically to reduce our carbon footprint and take some other drastic actions. Denying it is just a recipe for having to move in a couple of years in the city that we know actually not being here. And this is true about Miami, which is where the Conference of Mayors was. Right. And Mayor Levine is doing an incredible job there as well. So mayors are not going to wait on Washington. We're going to protect our people because that's our job.
Essence Music Festival, going into its 23rd year. I've spoken at every one of them, and it's enormous. And it had to leave 1 year because of the Hurricane Katrina and what it had done to the city. And you helped to bring it right back to New Orleans. You've been here as Lieutenant Governor. You've been here your whole term as mayor, and you've got everybody here, hundreds of thousands of people, and it brings $200 million into the city.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
great.
know, it's the empowerment sessions, hearing the speeches, and the top entertainers, and getting out to hang out backstage. I did with people like Halle Berry. I mean, there's nothing like this in the country.
No, you know, New Orleans has always been a great sports entertainment town. We host some of the biggest conventions, and it produces a lot of jobs. In the city of New Orleans, there are 80,000 people and a $5 billion part of our economy that surrounds major events like this coming in. And Essence Festival is at the top. This is a 500,000 person event. As I said, it brings in $200 million of economic impact, puts a lot of our cultural economy workers to work. If you were backstage, the back of the house side of Essence is as exciting as the front of the house side. All of the technicians, all of the folks that manufacture the products, all of the different sponsors. And so for the people of New Orleans, Essence has been a great partner, but it's actually more valuable than that because, you know, they call it a party with a purpose. And aside from all of the great entertainment from Diana Ross to Mary J. Blige and John Legend and Jill Scott and all of the people that were there this weekend, what you also see is really tough issues being dealt with during the day at the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center, where we're talking about issues that really affect all people of America, and particularly people of color, and in that subset, women, and about issues that confront them, and they come out of it with a much deeper understanding. So if you compare it to what goes on in Davos, for example, with all the CEOs from all around the world, the intellectual capital and content of what goes on in Essence matches any other event like this in America. And of course, we're thrilled to have them, and we think that New Orleans and Essence are tied at the hip.
Well, it certainly has been that way since they started. As I say, I am a witness. Mr. Mayor, I would say because you elect a new mayor in October here that we'll miss you, but I don't think we'll miss you because the people of New Orleans made it loud and clear they're not going to let you go. Thank you for being
Reverend
with me
Sharpton,
this morning.
when you come back every year, I'm going to be sitting in the front row with you, so I'll be there. I'm not going anywhere.
That's a deal. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty.
Up next, my final thoughts on the 4th of July weekend and what it should mean and will mean.